My name is Chris Jordan, and I'm a climate punk because this is a problem that can be solved. There is nothing standing in the way.
This is Climate Punk, and my name is Thomas Kolster. I'm behind the microphone on a mission to find radical new answers to the climate emergency. And I guess, yes, that is really needed. No more bullshit. What I've been doing is I'm traveling around the world digitally to talk to really, really exciting climate punks, hopefully to inspire you to find the climate punk within yourself. In this episode, I feel really privileged to talk to one of my heroes, Chris Jordan. He's a photographic artist, a filmmaker, a cultural critic, an art educator, and a relentless critic of consumerism. Yet, Chris believes in the power of beauty and love. Welcome to Climate Punk, Chris. So it's probably not the first time you hear this, Chris. Being sort of the Albatross man, you're the one that opened, I think, the whole world's eyes to the problem of plastic waste in the oceans, and definitely my eyes towards that problem with your very, very iconic imagery from Midway Islands. Do you want to take us back to that time and what sort of sparked you to do those images?
It's always difficult to revisit that project. But basically, I've been interested in our culture of mass consumption for basically my whole career as a photographer for a few decades now. And for me, up until quite recently, my whole philosophy has been about facing the darkness, like just fully confronting the monster. And so that's what that project was about. And the question that I went to Midway with is, how do we fully face just one of the environmental tragedies that is happening in our world? Like, go stand in that fire. How do we face that and not come away devastated and depressed and paralyzed with sadness and fear for our future? And that's really like and that just kind of jumps me right to the heart of what my work is about. Is like, I'm not an activist in terms of like telling people what to do out in the world. All of my work is about, like, how do we live up here in our mind? That's where the real problems are. That's where the problem of climate change lives. It's not a thing out in our physical world. It's in here. And this is where the solution lies. And that's a hopeful thing to me, because we can change this.
It's a sort of a message and something that I can see across your work. And I think from from some of your earlier work that really struck a chord with me and seems so relevant today, sort of in the face of destruction and environmental catastrophe, you still somehow find beauty, curiosity, and in the wake of Katerina, and I think we're back in about 2005 now. You created this series, and I really love the title because you called it an unnatural disaster. And this, as we can see in the image, this is land mover that's sort of like completely like taken apart by the hurricane. And I think with what's happening right now, we see it now in Libya, we see it in Hawaii. For me, at least, this way of portraying the force of nature in a different light. How was it being there on the ground and taking these unusual, stunning photos?
Ugh. It was so shocking to see the absolutely devastating power that a hurricane has. And it was so interesting at the time because there was all of this debate about, was it caused by climate change or was it not caused by climate change? And Katrina it was the most powerful hurricane ever to hit the coast of the US, but you could say, well, that's the 100-year hurricane. Has nothing to do with climate change. Um, and the thing that struck me at the time, what the scientists were saying, and this has played out ever since, is they say there is no specific weather event that is caused by climate change, but it was probably made worse by climate change. And in the case of a hurricane, what causes hurricanes, it's the difference in temperature between the water and the air. And that just causes a swirling motion. And if the water is 1 degree hotter, then that puts like 40 Hiroshima bombs worth of energy into the swirling motion. And it turns it from a category 3 into a category 4 hurricane. And so that's why I called it an unnatural disaster. It's like it was enhanced or like amplified by climate change. And that was clear to all of the scientists at the time. And since then, we've had this kind of string of disasters that are all worse than they would have been and kind of getting worse.
One of the projects that I think is extremely relevant right now to look at is you have this series called Intolerable Beauty, where you sort of go into the US and you do these portraits, these sort of documentations, I guess, of US waste. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and sort of why do you criticize consumerism? Why is consumerism such an important part when we both talk about Midway, when we talk about Katerina? What's wrong with consumerism?
God, I wish we had like 4 hours. These are such important questions. Um, well, I'm really interested in following problems all the way back to their source. And I think a big broken piece of the environmental movement is to look at a problem and try to solve that exact problem. And for example, if you find a plastic straw on the beach, then you think, okay, the solution is to not use plastic straws. But the plastic straw on the beach is actually a symptom. That's not the problem. It's a symptom of something much deeper. It's an entire broken system. It's a runaway train of waste. Like why we don't need to drink out of straws at all. And why are we using plastic? How is that stuff getting to into the ocean? Um, and any problem out there in the world, all of our problems, including most of our social problems, if you trace them back, like following a stream up a mountainside until you find the spring that it comes from, they all originate in the same place, which is our culture of mass consumption.
But it seems like you documented, you had it in Midway, you had it in Intolerable Beauty, you had it even in one of your other latest works where you actually put numbers into perspective. What is your message around consumption? Should we consume less? What's the solution? How do we get to the root cause of all of this?
I'm not trying to change something about our consumption. What I'm trying to change is the collective mind. It's the collective story. Like we're in a story, and the way I see it is all of the problems out there in the world, whether it's environmental destruction, all the different forms of environmental destruction, and all of our social problems, social injustice, racism, violence against women, all of those things, in one way, you can isolate each one and say that's the problem. Like the destruction of the Amazon rainforest is a problem, or climate change is a problem, that we have to solve that problem. And in another way, which is what I'm interested in, is all of those things, those phenomena can be seen as symptoms. They're physical symptoms of a problem that is up here, a mental problem that we all share together. And I'm interested in tracing back to that. And the beautiful thing about recognizing that the problem is up here is this is something we can solve. And the more we become aware, the more we can like shine the light of awareness into the insanity of our habits and realize that it's not making us happy. Um, and like start to really look deeply what does make us happy, like how can we reconnect with this fountain of love that we're all made of, like why are we so far away from our essential state of being, which is to be in love with the miracle of our lives, with the miracle of each other. Like why aren't we dancing in the streets with joy for the unbelievable universe that we've been born into? How can we get back to that? That's all up here. And that's what I'm interested in, is like finding doorways that lead home.
I think you definitely open that door to a lot of people, and I think art is opening our eyes. Art is a part of that change in terms of helping our collective minds, and maybe also for you to make us realize that we do have a role in all of this, and 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 I think that brings me to one of your latest pieces of work. What's your message here? Because it's almost for me it's it's sort of further away from sort of the apparent sort of catastrophe, the consumption. It's more philosophical.
If you look out into the zeitgeist, into the public mind, it's a scary picture right now. Like millions of people are living in a state of terror that the world's going to end or that something horrible is going to happen and we're not going to get to live our lives. And especially young people. My friends who are in their 20s are just paralyzed with anxiety, and they suffer all kinds of symptoms like addiction and alienation and just a sense that they're too small to make a difference in anything. And so they just kind of check out on a general level, like check out from the physical world and live in the virtual world. And I don't want to say that doomsday environmentalism has caused all of it, but it has played a role.
Yeah.
When I grew up, my parents spanked me. When I was bad, I got spanked. And when I was really bad, I got whipped with a belt. And that's just how it was back then. And when I look back, I can't blame my parents for being bad parents because that's just what everybody did. And since then, our psychology has evolved. And now we realize that spanking your kids is a terrible way to relate to your kids. And it produces exactly the opposite result of what you wanted. And I have this sense that the environmental movement has been spanking the public all this time, thinking we're doing the right thing, amplifying fear in the public mind as a way to try to motivate people to do something. And it's time to move past that. Our psychology has evolved. And we can now see that amplifying fear in the public mind is a terrible, an unwise practice because it leads to fascism. And so I'm trying to find a new North Star that we can set our compass to and navigate forward as environmentalists. And the challenge is we can't turn away from the darkness. We have to face the bad news with laser focus more than ever. So I don't want to live in denial. Like my new work is not about pretending the problems don't exist and living in some sort of denial. But there's a missing piece that I wish I could just zap the entire world, that we would all remember this thing. And this is the mission that I'm on right now, is to remember the thing that is the most obvious possible thing that we've all forgotten together. And that is that our world is beautiful.
I think your resounding message of hope is something that we've had others talk about at Climate Punk as well. That there's a fear, and that fear might unfortunately lead to people just not doing anything.
There are two things about hope that are problematic. One of them is it's fundamentally passive. What I mean is, we don't hope for what we can control. We hope for what we can't control. So, like, I hope the world doesn't get hit by an asteroid,
Yeah.
or I hope I don't die in my sleep tonight. But I don't hope that I brushed my teeth this morning. I just go do it.
Yeah.
So if you think that way about hope, it's a fundamentally passive state of mind, and in that way, it's disempowered. And another thing about hope is that it's not rooted in the present moment; it's rooted in the future. I
Yeah.
hope something good happens in the future, and if something good happens and if I have that feeling, that sort of optimistic feeling that good things are going to happen in the future, then I'll be okay now.
Yeah.
And so our hope is like this roller coaster that whenever we hear bad news, it goes, oh no, it goes down. And then we hear good news and then it goes up. But there's always more bad news. So it's our hope is always going down.
And what's the injection we need? What's the new word? What's the new vocabulary that we need to get?
Love. That's the thing we all crave. If you think of like, what is this hope that we want? It's just the wrong word. We want to be connected with love, and love is not dependent on the future. It's right now, and it's this incredibly powerful state of mind and heart that when we're in that place, no one needs to tell us what to do. We know what to do. We have access to our wisdom. And so my whole philosophy is about connecting with love and letting go of everything else. Because if we could collectively connect with love, then everything would solve itself. Everyone would know what to do. We'd know how to change our systems. And of course, we know there are many scientists and brilliant writers who are telling us that to solve climate change, we already have all of the technology we need. It's not a technology problem. It's a collective will problem. We haven't found the collective will to do the things that we know we need to do. And that's up here, and that we can solve.
So we have this business to ask questions to you using the hashtag Ask Climate Punk. Hi, Chris. What was your eye-opening moment to the climate emergency, if you had one?
So for me, I've never had a question in my mind about whether it's real. And the most alarming thing to me about climate change is the public story, like the battle that is going on about what is the truth. It's fascinating. It's like there's this giant ball of fear that's invisible to a lot of people that they just like that they live inside that unconsciously, and that makes them adopt stories and be easy to manipulate. Um, and that's what I'm interested in fighting. Like I don't feel like a warrior out there in the physical world. I'm interested in changing, like helping people awaken and see it is a crisis, but we don't have to exaggerate the words, and we don't have to be like, oh my God, because it's a crisis that's going to be there for the entire rest of all of our lives. So let's chill out. Let's get really smart and really wise and connect with love and like be adults and make ourselves strong internally in here, and then go forward. And I believe it is something we can solve. There's nothing standing in the way.
I absolutely love that, Chris. And I think that the best way to probably fight fear is good doses of love. And thanks for reminding us of that message. And I think this is a really good way of wrapping up this episode. Thank you, honestly, for joining us. And all of you out there, don't forget to be the very, very best climate punk you can be. It's really needed. And obviously, follow our mission on social. See you at our next episode. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for having me on, Thomas. Cheers.